welcome to another episode of IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Mike Roderick, and with me today is Mr. Sean Oriano. How are you doing, Sean?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
I'm fantastic. We've got another exciting episode coming your way. We're dealing with our Kali Linux, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about installing Kali, because there really are several different ways you can go about installing Kali and working with Kali. So, Sean, let's talk about some of the different ways and even show you guys a couple of ways we can install it.
Yes, Kali does have a whole bunch of options as far as how you can install it. Which way you install it really kind of depends on what your personal preference is and just really what you're trying to accomplish. It would be another factor that comes into it. So, we talked about the fact that you can physically install it on a hard drive. You can run it live, which is just running it off a piece of media. You can put it in a virtual machine, or you can even run it in what they call forensics mode. So you have those options, and you could probably make some variations of those too if you really wanted to be honest. Every one of those offers us something. Typically, if we look at one like the live version where someone has just downloaded the ISO and is burning that ISO to a DVD, for example, they're doing that just so they can, typically they do that when they test drive it for the first time. But it's not the only case. You can use it for other reasons too. It doesn't mean, hey, if you're running the live version, it's just you're just test driving it and that's it. You might use it just because it's a practical way for you to drop it into a machine and boot off that and be able to do what you need to with that machine, and then you can walk away. I mean, you can see how useful that would be as a pen tester if you could get physical access to a machine and just be able to drop that in and boot the machine off of it. You got to a point where you're using that machine's hardware, but you're not touching the operating system. And so you could run your tests and all that, and when you're done, shut the system down, eject the CD, and walk away, and boot the thing back up. It's back where it was. So that would be kind of useful there. So that would be the live version of it. Then you have installing it within a virtual machine. Virtual machine is what we're going to be using here during all our playing around and demoing. We're going to do it that way because it's just easier for us to do here. It also has a practical advantage too. You can still do real-world physical pen testing with the Kali, even if it's installed inside a virtual machine. There's no problem with that. There are some limitations here or there, but we're not even going to get to those yet, and we'll worry about those when the time comes. So for the most part, you can put something, Kali, right inside your virtualization software, run it from there and be just fine. You can do a live install from a virtual machine too if you want, so you could just go ahead and mount the ISO and start it up and not install it to the virtual hard drive, or you could install it to the virtual hard drive. Your call. There's
flexibility is good, right? We all like options, and it sounds like they give us plenty.
Yeah, you've got so many options. Then you have the installation to a physical drive. You've got just installing it to a hard drive. So I could drop that media in and just install it on there and be ready to go. Now it becomes my operating system for that. And then the other way to do it, as far as not just install it on a hard drive, you could also install it on a USB drive too. There's no limitation for that. So you can have a flash drive, you can dump it right on there and be ready to go. And that gives you some really interesting possibilities there. I mean, you think of how easy it is to sneak in a flash drive someplace and how many different form factors flash drives come in. I've even seen the James Bond style watch that you pull the thing out of it and plug it in. So you could typically technically do it with that. I've got pens.
Yeah. Reach over there, just slide that into your computer. Real quick.
Just do something like that. I mean, I've got a pen, at home that you just unscrew it, and it's got the USB plug right there. You just pop it in. It's easy. All you do is just you clip it on your shirt. It's a pen. No one's really looking at that. And so you've got plenty of options, in that at that side as well. And then that last one really isn't an install, but it is an option, is that forensics mode. And that forensics mode would be for doing imaging and investigations of a system. So it is fully capable of doing that. And like I was saying in our other segment, it looks very similar look and feel wise to a live version of Kali. except the difference is it prevents you from doing stuff with the drive. You can do analysis on it, but you can't alter anything there. So it's almost like putting a physical write blocker in there. If you remember that from our DFI class, just if you didn't do that one, it's a DFI, or the DFI class talked about a write blocker, which is a hardware device that you plug in between the hard drive and the rest of the system. So it blocks writes going to the device, so you don't alter it in any way.
Right, because if we're doing a forensic investigation, one of the keys is to make sure we don't modify anything we're touching, because that's going to contaminate the evidence and things like that. So the fact that Kali has a mode that we can turn on to prevent any types of writes or changes to the system, just another reason why this is a great choice when it comes to picking your Linux distro. All right, so let's start with, what do you want to do first, Sean? With all the different ways we can go about installing it, how about installing it in a VM maybe?
Yeah, we'll install it in a VM. That's always the good place to start, is just to put it right inside a VM. What I'm going to do is I'm going to install it in a VM with a VirtualBox. You know, that's probably what a good number of you have. So what I'm going to do is I have on my screen here, I have a VirtualBox started up. You can see I already have a couple virtual machines over there on the left-hand side, but I'm just going to create another one. And what I'm going to do is I will name it, and I'll call it, I'll call it Kali Linux. Actually, I spelled that the wrong way. It's Kali Linux. So got to pronounce it differently. See,
That's right.
It's a subtle difference.
We're going back to Kali Linux.
So you choose Linux, and what you can do is if you go down through the list, and you can see we have a whole bunch of different versions in there. What you should be doing is just depending on the version you got, if you got 32 or 64-bit, you're going to choose the appropriate one. Here I've got a 64-bit machine, and I've got a 64-bit version of Kali, so I'm just going to go ahead and click Debian, because we said it's based on Debian. They're not going to have Kali sitting there. Well, I didn't see it. I'll take another look, but they didn't have it sitting in there. They don't even have backtrack in there. So
right. So since they don't have Kali listed specifically as one of the versions, and what VirtualBox can do is they can have certain settings that particular flavor of Linux might like. Backtracks or Kali Linux doesn't show up in there, so you can pick, since it's based on Debian, we could go ahead and pick that one. I've seen some people just pick that Linux like 3, but if you know what kernel it's based off of, you can also pick that as well.
Yeah, if you know that, hey, great. If not, you can usually even just choose a generic one and tweak the settings anyway.
I mean, in the end, you can really probably pick any one of them and it'll work just fine. As long as remember, you got to have the platform though. 32-bit, 64-bit, that will make a difference.
Yes, and that is a little gotcha, just in case any of you run into this. You can have a situation where you install your virtualization software, on the system, and you get ready to do this process, and you go down to this version drop down on here, and when you go to the drop down, all you see is 32-bit. And you've got well, how the heck did that happen?
You've already downloaded the 64-bit ISO, now what?
Yeah, you're like, well, it says 32. It says 32-bit in here, but the machine absolutely 64-bit. You know that for a fact. What's going to happen with virtualization software when it does that is you're probably going to have to go into BIOS and activate the virtualization extensions, and then it will go ahead and it will say, okay, now I see that they're there, and the 64-bit stuff will pop up. But that's if you're in that situation.
Good
Sometimes
tip.
it happens.
Yeah, good tip to know. So remember, if you don't see any 64-bit options in there, and if you've never played with any virtualization software before, good chance that the options aren't turned on in the BIOS of your physical machine itself. Reboot your system, hit your F12, whatever you got to do to get into your BIOS, enable any virtualization options through your BIOS, get back into Windows if that's what you're running, launch VirtualBox again, and see if your options don't change.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got that punched in. I'm going to go ahead and click next. Memory. Memory is the big question on this. You at least want to have what we've got here, which is 512 megabytes. You at least want to have that. It will work on that. I'm not saying it's going to work really well, but it will work. And you should really, it's really also kind of worthwhile pointing out in here is that you can run, if you're installing this on a physical machine, you're not installing this on a virtual machine. If you install this on a physical machine, it doesn't have to be a new machine. You can get an older machine, and this will work well on that too. So this really doesn't need a ton of resources to use. That's the really cool thing about it. But that being said, you probably still want to, if you have it available, kick it up. So in my case, I'll just go up to 1024. 2048 is really good as well. But so I see in here I've got it 1024. I click next. I'm going to create a virtual hard drive, so it's just going to create that file. I'm going to install everything onto. So I'll just go ahead and click create. This hard drive type usually doesn't matter unless you're going to be moving it between virtualization platforms or you have some other management or administrative stuff going on. For what we're doing, care less. I just leave it as a default. So once we have that, this is an interesting one. You and I had a talk about this, and some of you may have heard it when we were talking about this on the break. Is what type of hard drive do the dynamically allocated, which means it resizes, or the fixed size where it takes what it needs at the beginning? Personally, for me, I've always used dynamically allocated with this, and I've never really had any problems with it. It's, in fact, interestingly enough, it's been on the Windows side where I've had problems with it. It hasn't been here. But you'll look at a lot of the guidance that they have online that says use a fixed size. A lot of them say just go with fixed size, fixed size, fixed size. I don't know. I'm going to leave it as dynamically allocated. The machines I showed you running are dynamically allocated, but
if it works, it works. Yeah. I will say that if you have a problem, because I've run into the issue, as we were discussing earlier, trying to install Kali, and I'm like you. I always use the dynamic. These aren't production machines. I'm not worried about any performance I take from doing a dynamically expanding drive, and I'm more concerned about space. So I don't want to dedicate 64 gigs to this drive when it's only going to have a couple gigs of data on it. I don't want to do a fixed drive. I want to do dynamic. But I will tell you that I've had a situation where installed Kali, it finishes, everything looks like it installed correctly, but when it goes to boot, it tells me I'm out of hard drive space. And from doing a little bit of research, it looks like the the swap volume was unable, something about it was unable to expand the drive, so it saw it as the drive being out of space. I switched over to a fixed size and everything worked fine. So if you run into the problem, I would say use dynamic. If you have a problem with the dynamic drive, then maybe try the fixed.
Yeah, just be aware of that. I mean, they give you some little guidance here on it. You can see the default to dynamically allocated. They give you some guidance. I believe on some of your virtualization platforms, I know on some of your virtualization platforms, you do have the ability to switch after the fact. So you're not exactly stuck if that situation does arise for you. But like I said, dynamically allocated, I'll leave it as it is for right now. Anything else? And see, here's the thing: it's saying how much space does it need for that for the virtual hard drive. So what I'll do is I'll just go to be safe. I'll do well, not 20. I'll do 20 gigabytes. I know it's not going to be that big, but that's the way I'll do it. So I'll go ahead and click create. And I have a virtual machine that's been, it's been populated. It's basically an empty, kind of just an empty system right now. I always like to, when I'm doing this, I like to, highlight the machine and go to settings, and just to double check everything's what I need to have. There are some things that are worth doing, and this in VirtualBox, this is the way you set it up. Some of the other virtualization software does this, not all of them. But what you have here under the general section, under the advanced tab, you can see here the sharing of clipboards. If you set them to bidirectional, it means you can actually move stuff back and forth between the host machine and this one. It's not always the best situation to do. And you notice you can set it to go one way or just the other way, or in this case both, or you can, by default, it's shut off completely. So if you want to make your life a little easier, maybe copy stuff in and copy stuff out, that would be the way you could do it. But I wouldn't tell you, just go ahead and turn it on as a matter of fact anytime you go in. think about if that's something that's worth you doing. Because there is a potential security risk there. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you can drag stuff between the host machine and that machine, one of the reasons why we say we do virtualization is because we have that sandbox, that enclosed environment. You've just busted that sandbox there to a certain degree. So anyway, and I know, and I know some of them just don't plain allow it, or I'm unaware of a way to allow it. I think if you're one of the people that use Hyper-V, I don't think Hyper-V there's even a way to turn it on. I think Hyper-V just blocks it completely and that's it, but I may be wrong.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you'd have to network them together and then set up a shared folder like a normal network or something like that.
Okay.
But, so something to keep in mind, if you're in your own sandbox and you want to be able to move stuff back and forth, that might be the easiest way to go. If you're doing a pen test or something like that, you might not want any sharing between the host machine. And then a quick question from the VM from the chat room. I know Jason asked, wouldn't a fixed size be better for portability of the VM? Well, I think it might depend on what you're trying to do. If you're putting this on a USB hard drive and you want to take it to another machine that's also running VirtualBox, I don't think it would really matter because the file's on the portable hard drive. If you're talking about trying to put this on a live, like on a thumb drive to run it live, you're not going to have that option to create fixed or dynamic, right? It's going to install on that thumb drive. So if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I've never really, can't say I've even had a problem with it when it's been dynamically allocated, because I've copied virtual machines back and forth just by copying them to a flash drive or to a portable hard drive and moved them all over the place and had zero problems with it. So I can't say it's better. One of the things they say about a fixed drive that comes in is also is the performance issue. It could be, what Mike was pointing out as far as it bumping its head up against the size limit when it's trying to swap or generate a lot of files. That could definitely be a problem. But I could even say, one of the things I'm thinking of when you were talking about the swap file in there is, what about if you give it enough space? What if you went like me here, and I said, well, I'm going to go from the 8 gigs up to 20. Well, that would seem to take care of the swap file. Well, I would hope.
You would think, but I did a dynamic, and I think I gave it 64 gigs. So it should have had plenty of room to expand. And it could have been something on my machine too. So like I said, just try it, see what you think. But as far as which one's better, it's really just what you need. The differencing disks take up less, or they're not the differencing, but those dynamically expanding take up a lot less space, so they can grow as needed. They can become fragmented. Could be a performance hit, but again, these aren't production machines. This is your penetration testing machine, so I don't think you really have to worry about
it. And it's really important to emphasize at this point. We're showing you. We're going to be showing you all these great things during this, this whole week. We're going through just different features and different capabilities. We're going to talk about different environments you can go in. It still falls on you to experiment with all this and test it out to see which ones are going to be more appropriate for you. I can speak for from experience and stuff I've done, but that is going to be different to whatever degree from what you've done. So you're going to have to try this stuff out and see which tools you like, which installation you like, which ones work. So you really got to think about it. I would tell you, one of the things that comes into play for me is that this computer right here, would never, well, at least right now, I just don't want to mess with it. I would never physically install Kali on it. It's not worth it, because the fact is Linux has problems with or I shouldn't say problems, it sounds negative, but it requires extra configuration with touch screens, the multi-touch. At least on this model it does. And so I can make it work, but there's a whole bunch of stuff I got to load, and I just don't want to mess with that. I've got older computers at home, and if I don't have one that is suitable at home, I'm using for something else, I can go up on eBay, and trust me, you can buy a computer for a computer that's like a couple $100, and this will work just fine on it, no problem.
All right, so we got all the way through the wizard. We've created that dynamic expanding drive. We've checked a couple settings in there. What's next to get this thing installed?
The next thing is to go ahead and start the install. And the way we do that is I am going to, at least in VirtualBox, click Start. And when I click Start, it's going to bring it up, and it says on my screen, which it will say something similar on yours unless you mounted it ahead of time. It's going to say, okay, what do you want to what do you want to mount in here? So what it's already got Kali Linux chosen in there, but the reason why it's got that is because I'd already set up one, prior with it. So it says, okay, whatever the last one you used was, it remembered it.
Yeah, so don't think it's going to magically find your ISO that you
Yeah.
downloaded. It did it for Sean. How come it's
Yeah.
not finding mine? He's already browsed to it once before, right?
It's 20 years experience, guys. That's what happens right there.
right.
It knows better. It's like we understand. Here you go. What I have here. So like I said, if you click that little folder icon sitting over there on the right hand side, it's just going to bring up a browse window, and you go find your ISO, and that's it. So no big surprise. Everyone can do that. So what I'm going to do is I will click start, and so it goes ahead, and you can see it boots the thing up, and boom, we get this first thing up here. It says, how do you want to install this? Now notice it's got all these different options on here. You've got a lot of options. Looks like way beyond what we talked about, and it's really not all the stuff that we talked about's here. You can see that we have the live one, which just that's all it is. It will go ahead and load the thing in all into memory, and boom, done. Fail-safe would be kind of a troubleshooting type thing. We'll worry about that when we get to it. The forensic mode, well, we know what that one does. But then here's the USB options. If you want to install it to a USB using Kali, what's really neat about it is if you take a look at it, it's got USB persistence and encrypted persistence. What's the neat thing about that is you were mentioning it, Mike. You can have it where it's essentially it is a live version. So when you power the system off, the operating system goes poof. But all the data and stuff like that can be saved on that device. So that'd be really neat if you've got a flash drive. You get a flash drive, you put this on there, and you can carry your data around there. All you need is a host machine, plug it in, boot off the USB device, and you've got your stuff there.
That's beautiful. I like that option.
Yeah, it's great to be able to have that. The installation buttons or the installation options down here, I mean, those are as straightforward as you can get. I mean, you can even have the thing talk to you if you want.
Would you like to play a game?
Yeah. You're sitting here and going, is Stephen Hawking here someplace? But anyway, so I've got that. I've got this thing up there. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to do the graphical install just to make it easier on us. And so it goes through, and you can see it starts puking all this stuff up here. I'll close these couple windows up here that are chattering at me. And so what we're seeing here, it says, okay, language. You can see it's a very simple install. Where's your location? Well, you would obviously choose wherever you are. Key map. Usually it's fine with choosing the correct keyboard mapping for it. And sometimes, depending on the power of your machine and how much memory you've allocated to this, sometimes it can go faster or slower or install. Usually the installation is pretty fast, anyway. But depending on what the specific situation is, it might take longer, might take shorter. But the thing is that it's the amount of steps you go through for this are really not that many. It's really a short number of steps. Now, if we had chosen the live installation of it, the live installation just will load the thing up and go right in to the desktop. It doesn't need to do any of this. So what I have here is it's it's asking what the name of the machine is. So I could just call it it's a test machine. Then I can go through and click continue. Of course, I don't need to provide a domain name. I'm on a standalone system, and so it's just gonna go right through. Password. It's asking me what the password is, so I can put in just a password I want to use. So simple enough. I just type password. Hopefully that matched. Guess it didn't match.
Try that one more time.
I get that sometimes.
Pesky thing, making you tape it twice to make sure you type the same thing.
So, all right. So clock. We're gonna leave it on Eastern time. For here that's fine. So it just goes through and it's doing its job. Then it's going to ask you stuff about the disk and how to format the disk. That's one that you do want to be careful with, unless you're someone that's really, really like a Linux guru or really familiar with it. Then you probably aren't even going to bother messing with this. If you're in a multi-boot environment or something, then you are going to have to tweak this. So be careful. But usually, in our situation, we just say, and especially in a virtual environment, just use the entire disk. There's really no reason to go through and do any funny segmenting and stuff like that. There are some cases, and those are very, very specific, like the USB persistence deal, and it'll help you with that. And if you're, and if you're having problems with, and you do want to start adjusting this, and you're not sure, you've got some kind of scheme in mind, you're used to doing something in Windows, and you're moving it over here, then yeah, it's like was it Daniel or something does a Linux course?
Yeah, we've got a bunch of episodes where Don and Daniel have gone through Linux Plus, and they've actually talked about the logical volume manager and creating partitions. So if you want to dive in a little beyond the guided or just using the entire disk, go check out some of those episodes.
Yeah, and if you're new to the Linux world anyway, I mean, we're gonna get you through quite a bit here during the week, but. If you want to really unlock the power of this, yeah, you're going to want to watch that and practice to get familiar with it. It can't hurt you at all.
Exactly.
So I'm just going to use the entire disk. I hit continue. Yeah, that's the disk. So fine. I'm going to put all files in one partition. Yeah, that's fine. I don't need to break anything out. Do you want to make those changes? Yes, I do want to make those changes. And write up changes to the disk. Notice how serious a move this is. It's like it asks you a couple times, and it
says, least 4 times.
Do you want to do this? So go through. Yes, I want to do that. So it does the partitioning, and boom, it's going to go ahead and do the installation. And we can go to the restroom, whatever else we want to do. Come back in a few minutes, and it'll be done. It usually does not take that long. It can take anywhere. I've seen it take anywhere from 5 to maybe 10 minutes. Usually it's not any longer than that. Unless you happen to have some really old hardware, then yeah, it might take a little longer, but don't expect it to be like some ridiculously long, like a Windows install or something where you're going to have to go run some errands someplace or whatever.
Yeah, I want to say in the end it's like a 3 gig install or something like that. It's really not all that big. All right, well, I'll tell you what, while we're waiting for that one to finish up so we can show you the end result of there, I want to go through and show you a couple of other options that we can do when it comes to installing Kali. He's got it installing in that VM. If we pull up my screen real quick, remember we talked about downloading those ISOs. Another way we could do this, if you wanted to put this on a thumb drive, for example. I've got a little program that I've downloaded, and I'll share the link in a minute, called Win32 Disk Imager. Got it from SourceForge. And basically all you do with this one is find your device. Now I know my thumb drive is the D drive on this particular computer. Make sure you pick the right drive because it will format the drive, right? So make sure you know. I mean, if you have to double check, there's nothing wrong with it. Go over there and double check and see where your thumb drive is. And mine is D:, so I'm good to go there.
I always find myself with these things when you said about the drive. I'm always like, plug it in. I look at it and I unplug the flash drive and plug it in and note. It's like, okay, I got it.
Okay, that's the one, yeah. And so basically, you just find your device. You're going to find the ISO, and I downloaded that ISO earlier. Let's see if I can go grab it real quick. So I've downloaded Kali somewhere on here. And it's not an image file, it is an ISO. So I'm going to notice how to change that. That image writer is looking for an IMG file. Change that. There is my Kali Linux ISO that I downloaded. I'll click open. It's going to point it. And that's it. I click write. And it's going to warn me, hey, are you sure this is your last chance to get any data off that drive before I go on? I say yes. And it's going to cruise on through it. And it's going to make my bootable thumb drive. And at that point, I'm good to go. The other option that we've talked about was that downloading of the pre-built. Now, I know you guys said there's some trouble. If you're watching this live, that website is having a little bit of trouble right now, but they'll be back up soon. And I went ahead and downloaded the other day. I downloaded from Offensive Security this right here. Kali Linux 1.1.0a VBox AMD 64. It's a 7-zip file. I went and extracted that out, and what you end up with once you extract that out is this OVA, which is actually some kind of like an application actually, or what they call an appliance is really the term they use. And once I've extracted it out, all I'm going to do is double click on it and give it just a second or 10 seconds. We'll watch from my little flashing window down here. Oh, how many of those do I have open? Nice. And it's thinking about it. And there we go. And so here we go, import. So again, all I did was double click. Once I extracted that out from Offensive Security, I double clicked on the OVA file, and this is what happened. Oracle opens up, VBox opens up, VirtualBox, and you see all these properties. It's already got everything that it needs. Vendor's URL, version number, CPU, RAM. So some of these you can't really change some of this. That's the only thing. You might have to change it after the fact. But it's got all these properties, and I just click import, and it's going to begin the process, and you'll see a new virtual machine pop up over here in my VirtualBox manager. So a couple of easy ways to install it. You know, Sean's got it going on the virtual machine there. I just showed you in the time we're waiting for that to finish. I showed you how to grab the ISO and burn it to a thumb drive. Now you've got that bootable, because once that finishes burning to the thumb drive, I can take that thumb drive to any machine. That same screen that Sean just showed us is going to pop up. I select live, and I'm running it right from RAM. This VirtualBox appliance that I got from Offensive Security, it's going to finish in about 30 minutes, and I'll have a pre-built virtual machine extracted out with everything already configured, ready to go. I just have to log on. So a couple of different ways you can go about installing it. And how's your install going there?
My install is still cruising along. It's still just kind of like slowly. Just,
see if we can swap over to that other screen. We'll
we're
take a
about
look at
we're
that
about
there.
halfway. Look at
Halfway, all right, yeah. So, I mean, it's got to reach out and see if there's any updates, I think, to the packages, if you've got a network connection.
I'm not even sure it's got to that yet. It's still copying stuff out of the ISO, but you know,
Yeah,
this is I do have a good number of things here running. In fact, I've got 2 virtual machines running in the background behind this even. So
Right.
it's a little taxed right now, but you know, that's fine.
All right, well, I tell you what, Sean, it will, in our, go ahead.
Let me interrupt you. Sorry,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
you showed the one for doing the USB installation. This is one a website that's I've gone here multiple times, and this may also be of help. It's this pendrivelinux.com. This one also has their own installer,
Nice.
and so you can just have the ISO and tell it which one, and it will shoot it right onto the drive and install it on there for you.
Perfect.
And you can set the persistence and everything else in this.
Ooh, nice. I
So
like that one.
this is a universal USB installer, and so it's 100% free, and you can just boom, 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 with a few button clicks install Linux on a on a flash drive. So there's several ways to accomplish this task. What's cool about the tools here that Mike and I are talking about, this one and the other one, is there's other ones out there. This just makes it a little easier for you. Some people like having a little more control over it. If you're one of those people that really has to get into and micromanage it, or whatever you want to call it, and get deeply into there, then these probably aren't for you. And there are some specific cases where these just aren't going to cut it, whether or not you like to micromanage it or not. I've seen people do little things where they've used stuff like TrueCrypt and other utilities to make to set the drive up a certain way, so they've got a really kind of secure, robust solution that's tamper-proof and stuff like that. But some of the reasons they did it before are now covered by the new stuff, but you can, but there are still some cases where you might have to do it manually. But fortunately, those are very unique cases.
Good deal, because I sure do like those wizards.
Yeah.
All right, well, good deal, Sean. I think we've covered quite a bit in this episode. We've shown you several different ways to get Kali Linux installed. We installed it in a virtual machine. That one's running along. We installed it on a thumb drive, so we can run it as a live thumb drive and take it with us wherever we want, have it in our pocket anytime. We also showed you how to download one of those pre-built VBox or VirtualBox drives. They also have some pre-built drives for VMware. So if you've got VM Player, you could use that as well. So a bunch of different ways you can get this installed and get ready for the rest of the week and us going through all the different fun stuff we can do with Kali Linux. So anything else we want to throw in on our installation episode?
I don't think so. I would say, somebody please hit fast forward so this thing installs faster. But that's about it. You can see the installation it's really not that involved. It's a really simple thing to do. And you can see, oh well, heck, yeah, mine just finished, and you can see in here just asking a couple more questions and connect to the internet, like Mike was saying, to do the updates. And once it's done that, it should be just reboot, and I'll get that log on screen and be ready to go. So you can see, yeah, these things are not that involved. It's not nearly what a Windows installation is. A Windows installation, you got to babysit it for a certain period of time before you can let it go off on its own. And granted, Windows installations have gotten better than they were, but this
I was going to say, I remember some of the early Linux installs where you had to really know your stuff.
Oh yeah,
because you weren't working with any kind of wizards. You were at that command line, and you had to understand your temp space and your swap space and all that other stuff. And shoot, this makes it so easy. Even I can do it.
It's like, let's make this stuff easy. And so this one is. It is indeed easy to do. So you've seen how to install this, and like Mike was saying, it's like you should be choosing the way or experimenting which way is the best for you. I would tell you, as far as installation goes, start with something like what we're doing here. Just install it in a virtual environment. That's good enough to practice and learn the capabilities of it. If you're not familiar with it, practice it, learn, see what it can do, get kick the tires and all that. And you can, if you want, you can do a live install inside the virtual machine as well. But just install it, use it inside a virtual machine first, get used to it, get that whole feel of capabilities and all that. And then once you've got that down, then hey, either research some other ways you can configure it and install it, or experiment and go for it.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and wrap this episode up, and we'll have more exciting episodes coming your way dealing with Kali Linux, so don't go far. But for now, signing off for IT Pro TV, I'm Mike Roderick.
And I'm Sean Ariano.
And we'll see you next time.